Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. No matter what time of night or day, I'm still just as glad you stopped by the channel, so thanks ever so much. You found the Social Gospel Worship and Learning Center. This is the video channel, Social Gospel Channel, obviously. Anyway, we're an online faith-based community, and what I'm going to be talking to you for just a few minutes about today, is part of our ongoing biblical study series, not just Bible study, but the whole thing all the way through from book to book, chapter to chapter, and so on. Sequenced together in its proper order. Nothing out of context here. We only teach Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and nothing else. No denominations, no pomp and circumstance, no politics, none of that stuff. Just Jesus and Him alone. For today, the title is, What Does the Bible Say About Dealing Successfully with Suffering? So here's a good topic. Today we'll be finishing up 2 Corinthians chapter 11. As we continue with the Apostle Paul's train of thought regarding certain individuals who are in positions of leadership within the church. Paul the Apostle contended that they were there for all the wrong reasons. Each overseer, as they were called back then, of these various congregations was apparently bragging about how their church was the most spiritual, or the most generous, or the least sinful, and so on and so forth. More often than not, there was considerable time devoted on each Sabbath to preaching against something another church was teaching about its particular view of Christianity. It probably seemed at times as if each church was competing against others for membership as if they were businesses competing for customers. Does that sound familiar by any chance? I kind of thought it might. The very same thing continues to occur with disheartening regularity in the modern churches of today. And then they wonder why their congregations are not growing. Well, duh. Get a clue. Here's a saying from the Apostle James that fits right in here. Faith without works is dead. Now, I'm so glad that God continues to inspire me, His humble servant, to make sure that this online church is not like those mainstream churches, and never will be. Those of you who have been visiting our website, reading our blogs, or watching this channel must have noticed by now that I never write or post about denominational stuff, and I seldom comment on the teaching of any particular church, with the two notable exceptions of the prosperity gospel, as it's called, and the pre-tribulation rapture. This is not by accident. That's because I'm only interested in teaching about the truth, which is the Word of God that is not only devoutly believed in, but which must be acted upon through the adoption of Christianity as a lifestyle and not a mere set of human beliefs. It was the Apostle James who wrote, "Faith without works is dead," and that's just as true now as it was when it was first written 2,000 years ago. Having established these facts, let me now start today's study beginning at verse 16, and away we go. The words of the Apostle Paul. I repeat, let no one take me for a fool. But if you do, receive me just as you would a fool, so that I may do a little boasting. In this self-confident boasting, I am not talking as the Lord would, but as a fool. Since many are boasting in the way the world does, I too will boast. You gladly put up with fools since you are so wise. In fact, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you, or exploits you, or takes advantage of you, or pushes himself forward, or slaps you in the face. To my shame, I admit we were too weak for that. Close quote. That's verses 16 through 21 of 2 Corinthians chapter 11. There were times when Paul had to put the early church in its place. And this was one of those examples. So we see here that Paul was still on the subject of certain boasting or bragging that was going on between different churches, as you remember from last week's study, to the detriment of the spreading of the gospel. Much the same continues to occur today, daily in fact, in many of today's churches. But there is much more below the surface here. It looks to me like Paul the Apostle was telling the Corinthian church that boasting or bragging in church is completely improper and showed a lack of maturity or spiritual sensitivity. Not surprisingly, Paul condemns the actions of these congregations, calling them foolish. Actually, I suspect the original wording in Hebrew, which was the original language of the Bible, may have been far more blunt and direct, only to be sanitized centuries later by Emperor Constantine. Bad churches with corrupt leaders do exist. Unfortunately, it does happen. Paul continued as he wrote, you gladly put up with fools since you are so wise. In fact, you even put up with anyone who enslaves you, or exploits you, or takes advantage of you, or pushes himself forward, or slaps you in the face. Now, what does that look like to you? How does that read back? Paul was writing of congregations being enslaved, exploited, taken advantage of, and even physically attacked. There must have been no small number of self-styled preachers and self-appointed teachers who were doing so for profit instead of the advancement of the true gospel. There may have even been some who were using intimidation to spread their message. It created divisions within the churches, and there was apparently at least one incident where somebody slapped someone in the face for some long-forgotten reason. It is clear from these verses that profiteers and the power mad have been at work in churches for as long as houses of worship have been in existence, dating back to at least the time of Christ. For an example of that, remember the money changers in the temple at Jerusalem? When Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, and they spread palms across across the road, across the highway there. Yeah, it was in that same week leading up to that Friday when he was crucified that he ransacked the temple and threw out all the money changers, telling them my father's house has been turned into a den of robbers. Wonder what he'll say when he comes back today. Here we are. The Bible, Washington, D.C., and Benjamin Franklin. What do they have in common? Well, I need to take this to another level here my subject matter, so that it applies to governments as well as churches. We Americans put up with the fools in Washington who are supposed to be running our country, but instead they similarly enslave us economically and exploit us for profit, pushing themselves forward, as Paul put it, by rigging elections. And then they slap us in the face by poisoning our food, our water supply, our air above, and the ground below. I think Paul was absolutely right. So long as we gladly put up with fools, as he said, we will get whatever leaders we deserve. As Benjamin Franklin once famously said, those citizens who refuse to get involved in their country's politics deserve whatever leaders they get. The same applies to churches, people. We're bearing that in mind. Let's continue now. At verse 21, and I quote, "What else? What anyone else dares to boast about," Paul wrote, "I am speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast about. Are they Jews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and have been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my own countrymen, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false brothers. I have labored," Paul continued, "and toiled, and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst, and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of all my concern for the churches. Who is weak, and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin, and I do not inwardly burn? If I must boast, I will boast in the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is to be praised forever, knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, the governor, under King Aretas, in the city of Damascus, guarded in order to arrest me. But I was lowered in a basket from the window in the wall and slipped through their hands." That's 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 22 through 33. All 11 of them. As you can see here, people, Paul really paid his dues. The Apostle Paul is called a saint because of what he went through in the course of his preaching the gospel and the founding of churches through what is now much of the Middle East, Southwest Asia, Southeastern Europe, and Italy. He put up with all kinds of hardship and inconvenience, abuse and mistreatment, plus was in great physical danger for much of the time, nearly getting killed at least 8 times over the course of his ministry, before finally being beheaded in Rome. He also wrote about his empathy for the churches and for the unsaved, writing, "Who is weak and I do not feel weak? Who is led into sin and I do not inwardly burn? If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness." Close quote. Many in the developed world don't know how good they've got it. Here in the United States, well, here in North America, countries in Western Europe too. Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, etc., etc. And let's not forget India and China while we're at it. How many Christians are living this quality of life in churches today, particularly in the developed world? There is an important lesson to be learned here. If the Apostle Paul was willing to put up with all this just so he could spread the gospel, then we should all examine ourselves as to how totally dedicated we are to the Lord. Is our Christian faith genuine? Or have we become Christians in name only, who are just going through the motions? When religious persecution of Christians breaks out on the North American continent, and it surely will, based on biblical prophecy, see Revelation chapter 13, verses 5 through 10 for your reference on that, by the way. When religious persecution breaks out, we had better ask ourselves where we would stand in such an event. Christian missionaries of all faiths put up with exactly this kind of risk each and every day that they work overseas. We're nearly out of time, people. It is a fact that there have been more people martyred for their Christianity in the last 100 years than there were in the previous 1900 years combined. What would you do if the Antichrist came to power tomorrow, or next month, or next year, and who then will say we must all either take the mark of the beast or be killed? Are we indeed getting close to the end of all things as we have known them? Because if we are, it is imperative that we stand up for Christ. After all, he loved us and died on our behalf first. The time has come for all of us to get as serious about our faith as the Apostle Paul was, because where we spend eternity will depend upon it. We are all rapidly running out of time. And that concludes the study for this week. I hope you got something out of that. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something from it. These are intended to be educational, not just entertaining, not just history lessons. No, these run much deeper than that, as you can tell. Much deeper. Normally at a brick and mortar church, at the end of the service, we pass around the collection plate or the basket or whatever. Since I'm online, I can't do that. I don't have any way to, so I just don't worry about it. I rely on the kindness of strangers. If anyone out there would like to make a little contribution towards the continuation of this online ministry, you would be greatly appreciated. If you look at the instructions in the dialog box at the bottom of your screen down there, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find directions for sending us donations. Now, we are registered nonprofits on PayPal and on Stripe.com. Use either of those for making contributions. Or our mailing addresses at the bottom down there where you can send us a check if you'd rather do that. Please make a note of who to make the check out to. If you can't do either of those, y'all please excuse me. This is Chloe. She just woke up from her nap. But we're almost done now, so I'm not going to start over. Oh, don't forget to sign up for the blog or for the channel. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. You'll get 2 videos or 2 blog postings per week, each and every week without fail. And you can also become a member. The price is still $5 a month or $50 a year, but that's going to be going up by springtime. Not by a substantial amount, but I'll keep you posted on that. I'm still in prayer about that. But my expenses are going up, up, up. And I'm a disabled retiree. I don't do this. I don't get a salary for doing this or anything like that. But if you want to become a member, it's $5 a month or $50 a year. Don't forget to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe before you go. It really helps out with the algorithm. And before I go, I want to thank each and every one of you for the privilege of your time. You are also very, very much appreciated. Having run out of things to say, at least for this time around, everybody be blessed. Oh yes, I said be blessed. In Jesus' mighty name.